All right, let's just get all of our situations sorted, our bit rates and our other devices here. 9 decimals up, plus distance to the microphone. So last night, I clicked on this is basically a YouTube short that Manny Grossman had posted. And I was happy to see that I had received the 100% Grossman Files endorsement. You know, in true crime, there's not a lot of people that actually are level-headed. There's a lot of like weird hypothesizing, a lot of theorizing, a lot of nonsense going on in the community. And sometimes just misinterpretations of like what constitutes evidence. It's very common. You know, for example, right now we have somebody on a Zodiac killer group who is completely convinced that some random Greek guy is the Zodiac. And pretty much, it's no surprise to me that this individual is just another one of those characters who comes along trying to crack the Z13. And it's a really good barometer of somebody's scientific insight when they're trying to crack the Z13, because the Z13, while it could technically be cracked, you can't verify the solution, and so it's impossible to actually definitively or conclusively resolve that cipher. So it's a waste of time. And whenever we see folks like this come along who are trying to push their belief of who an offender is or whatever is going on, and they start bringing up things like the Z13 and composite sketches, you really get an understanding of just how little some of these people know. And I don't remember this guy's name. I think it's Maybick or something like that. But that's besides the point. And composites are a huge part of that, because people kind of have this faulty interpretation of what they actually are. So I prepared this little presentation last night, immediately after receiving the Grossman Files endorsement. Thank you, Manny. It's no surprise to me that he estimated my age at 25 or 26 years old, because I know I can be a little bit wonky. And so sometimes people will be like, oh, he's young. But really, I'm 29. But, you know, that's not surprising. I definitely don't take offense to that, because look at the screen right now. It says live from a spinning ball, the most banned prowler online. And there's like a spinning command. I mean, it's, you know, most people are like, oh, what's up, channel? All right, so I'm going to really try to pace myself on this one, because we have 11 points to go through, and I really want to be detailed on these. I really want to talk about what's going on with these points and not just race through them. And I have a difficulty doing that, because my mind works really fast, and sometimes I'll be like, okay, point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then boom, there's the stream, and I'm like, oh, now what? Let's talk Eurons. So I don't want to do that. I want to be thorough, and I want to really get into the weeds here, if I can. Here we go. Point 1. Well, okay, let's talk about, like, what's going on. See, people will come along in these communities and in these investigations and in these research efforts and in these discussions, and they'll be like, well, my suspect looks like the sketch, you know. And sure, that might be good. You know, I mean, if it's a sketch of a white guy and your suspect is black, then probably not the right guy that you're looking at, you know, especially if you have 5 composites and all of them show a white guy and your suspect is black, or your suspect is NASA, for example. Like, you're probably on the wrong track. But that's more of an accurate framework of what we're supposed to be doing with composite sketches. It doesn't mean, like, for example, I was on Reddit and there was this guy who said that the Ripon Court shooter wasn't Joseph D'Angelo, it was some other guy who was at the town hall meeting, and they said because he matches the sketch. And it's like, first of all, does he? And second of all, so what? That's not what a composite sketch is supposed to do. You're not supposed to, like, look at, oh, wow, he looks like that, therefore he's the guy. You know, we see this a lot. We see this with some of the Zodiac suspects. We see this with all kinds of situations. Or, for example, like in the Son of Salmon case, people go, oh, well, the sketch it's a different guy in each sketch. It's like, yeah, no shit. But that doesn't mean that it's a different offender. It just means that the sketches aren't identical. What do you want them to be? Like, are they supposed to all be identical? It's all supposed to look the exact same. Like the Wendy Savino thing. Like, there's this just degenerate on the internet. And I don't want to talk, I'm not even going to name them because I don't want to give them attention, but what I will do is give their points attention and then critique those points. That says that the Wendy Savino shooter sketch doesn't look like David Berkowitz. Well, first of all, I think it does look like David Berkowitz. And so we really just have a difference of opinion on that. But, like, it's not supposed to. It doesn't need to. And I would be very surprised if it does. It's pretty rare, actually, that, I mean, it happens. Some, like, I like the Baseline Killer composite sketch. I've showed it. I had a video on this channel called Times Composites Hit the Mark. And then it was sort of a display of times that there were accurate composites. And some of the times they weren't accurate composites. And even then, I showcased them. But this is what Ned DeHaan from Black Box Online Radio says, and I'm going to take his little catchphrase as point one of this presentation, and then we're going to talk about it. 1, a composite is not a photograph. Ned DeHaan quite famously says this over and over and over again on Zodiac Monday and DB Cooper Friday and stuff like that, where people are assuming, not everybody, but there's a large number of people who come into true crime and they assume that the composite sketch is a perfect likeness of the offender. Even with DB Cooper. With Cooper, we have the stewardesses were with him, or Tina Mucklow, for example, was next to him for like 5.5 hours. And do we know if Berkey Dirk admitted to deliberately changing appearance? Not sure. That's a good question for Manny Grossman, because Manny has all the Berkowitz files. But he must have been changing his appearance because he's quite clearly the shooter at All the Son of Sam. I mean, you have to be insane to think that this is like some kind of a cult, which we see that. It's a lot of insanity in true crime too. And we know that he did those Son of Sam shootings, and we see that his hair is different in those composites. And so there are some like actual conclusions that we can draw from a composite sketch, like, okay, does he have long hair? Does he have... And this is where really weird stuff starts happening in the East Area Rapist case, and I guess we can sort of talk about that if it comes up. I think it's going to come up on point 9, but we're going to get to it. A composite isn't a photograph. So people come and they look at the sketch and they're like, that's what he looks like. And sometimes, and it's disturbing, sometimes in true crime, we see people who decide that a composite sketch is exactly what the offender looks like because they want to have an understanding of what he looks like. And it's this inability to just not know that people struggle with a lot. And so people know that, and I think this problem is getting better. I'm not sure if it's just because of the types of people I'm surrounding myself with, but there's a large number of people in the world who simply can't afford or will not allow themselves to just not know something or to be wrong about something. And how delusional that way of life is, to go around and be like, no, that is what the Zodiac looks like. It must be. I refuse to not know what he looked like. And others still who, and this gets even darker, who will sort of applaud Lindsay Robbins or refer to Lindsay Robbins with this clearly displayed sense of internal envy because Lindsay Robbins got to see Zodiac and they didn't get to. So it gets to be really weird and creepy sometimes in true crime, and I think that comes with the territory of when you have people obsessing about murderers and rapists and things. But it's better for the strong-minded because it can be a very shadowy road. A composite is not a photograph. Even the picture of DB Cooper, and this is one of the reasons that I'm so fascinated with composite sketches and would like to pursue it as a career, because I'm obsessed with the idea that we have no fucking clue what DB Cooper looked like. We don't know. Now, we have some witness descriptions that are pretty reliable, and we think that we can, based on those witness descriptions, build a nice understanding. He probably looks a little bit like the Bing Crosby sketch, but we don't actually know exactly what Cooper looked like. Our vision of Cooper's face is, Composite Delta. Or was it Bravo? Anyway. Our vision of Cooper's face is the Bing Crosby sketch, or the famous FBI sketch, and this kind of thing. But it's not what he actually looks like. And that just blows my fucking mind. I love that concept. Like, there's only a couple people in the world who actually know what Cooper looked like, and by their own admission, some of these people's memories are getting pretty hazy, and they're getting influenced by the sketch. And what does that tell us? It tells us that he doesn't look exactly like the sketch. Like Tina Mucklow said, it might have been Tina, I think it was Tina and Flo Schaffner, said that their memory of Cooper is no longer accurate, because they've seen the sketch so many times that it's influenced so now when they remember the event, they're remembering the guy from the sketch. And the fact that they're able to differentiate that from the actual appearance of Cooper tells us that it's not a perfect likeness of Cooper, and therefore we have no clue what Cooper looks like. And I love that concept. I get chills talking about it. It's cool. Okay? Basically, don't rule somebody out from an investigation because they don't, quote, match the sketch. That is so stupid to do that. It's just stupid. It goes to show us, your actual understanding of these events. And people will say, well, yeah, but they were next to him for 5 hours. Remember, Flo Schaffner and Tina Mucklow both said that they can't remember what Cooper looks like anymore because they've seen the sketch so many times. And that, in some sort of indirect way, tells us that Cooper doesn't actually look identical to the sketch. Which, of course, he doesn't. It's a sketch, right? We don't know what he looks like. Eventually, hopefully, we'll catch him, or we'll identify him, and we'll know what he looks like, and that would be an amazing day. I'm hope to see that in my lifetime. I'd love to know who Cooper is, because I have no idea who he was. I don't even have a possible suspect. I don't think he's Ted Braden. Has anyone seen Ted Braden's nose? But, like, this is not understood, because people see a composite, like, oh, that's what he looks like. That's him. No, it's not. Point 2. Composites are sourced from fleeting glimpses, usually, under less than ideal conditions, and often during traumatic events. Okay, try the experiment for yourself. People don't experiment with stuff, and so they don't learn. You don't learn anything without experiment, basically. Like, you can read all you want. It's like when I went to the EAR crime scenes, or the ONS crime scenes in Irvine and Laguna Niguel, and I gained a whole new understanding and insight for the modus operandi of the Hurons, because I didn't understand just what Quester meant when he was talking about canals, walking paths, and the way that neighborhoods are connected and how it all went down. And when I went there on the ground, I was like, oh, shit. And it reframed my understanding. And by the way, that guy's a tactician. It's mind-blowing, guys. You have to go to the crime scene to see it. I can stress it to you, I can talk about it, I can point it out to you, but until you're actually going there and doing the groundwork, that's why one of the reasons I've even kind of slowed down on Zodiac Talk on this channel is because I've never been to his crime scenes, and so I really don't know. And even when I go to the crime scenes, I still really don't know, but I can start to get a better understanding of certain things, and that was very much driven home to me with the Hurons case. Like, when I went to Irvine and saw the Withun crime scene, I still think the Withun crime scene is a perfect textbook showcase of the EAR's modus operandi. And I think if you're interested in the Hurons case and you want to learn about his modus operandi and see how he conducted his crimes and how he treated his area of operations like a battlefield, go to Irvine. And specifically go to the Withun crime scene. Now, the Janelle Cruz crime scene has the same characteristics. There's a bike path, a canal, and a road, and a little shadowy sidewalk. Even little minute details, like there's a center divider on the main street so that he could jaywalk if he needed to in sets. Like, say he needed to run across the street and make a quick getaway. The median, the center divider, allowed him a place to stop. All this stuff was very calculated. It's very crazy looking at this in person and coming to these understandings. The one-way signs leading out of the Withun scene and the Janelle Cruz scene are a trip. There's minute characteristics and elements of the modus operandi that wasn't understood by me until I went to the crime scene. So if you're interested in that case, go to Irvine. It's a trip, and specifically go to 35 Columbus in Irvine, because and really have a look around. Start at Jeffrey, start on Jeffrey Road, basically start on Jeffrey and Trabuco, and walk on the Withun side of Jeffrey Road until you get to Bryan Avenue. Turn left on Bryan Avenue, follow Bryan Avenue, and then turn left at the walking path that leads to Blue Gum Park, and that's the route. You can tell when you're there. You can feel it and see it. It's obvious when you're there. You're like, oh, this is how he found this neighborhood. He went this route specifically. I couldn't tell you that by looking at satellite imagery. I tried. I looked at all kinds of these crime scenes in satellite imagery. I have no understanding of the Maggiore crime scene or its tactical advantages and characteristics because I haven't been there. So try the experiment. Here's an experiment for you about composites. Find an actor that you've never seen before. Or, better yet, that your friend has never seen before, okay? Or, find a person or an actor. Like, a way to do that is to watch the end credits of a movie and then just pull up the IMDb of some random person's name you don't recognize from the movie, and then you'll get a photo of them, right? Or look at, like, a random photo of somebody. Now, print that out. Or, put it on your phone or a tablet screen, or a little bit bigger is probably better. So I would go with a printout. Have your friend who's never seen this person before. All right. Now, if you're good at drawing faces and you want to be the person drawing the composite sketch, then it also has to be someone that you've never seen before at all, ever. But if you're not good at drawing faces, then get a friend who's good at drawing faces. Get a friend who all they need to do is look at the image. And then turn the lights off in your house so it's like kind of dark and dim, and they'll walk past that person with the photograph, and maybe even from a little farther away in a varying speed, right? And you can test all variables you can test, and kind of jog past that person and let them catch one glimpse of that person's face as they pass by. And you can always, even sometimes you can let them see them in detail and go kind of slowly, or let them kind of sit next to the sketch or of the photograph. Now, have that person go to an artist, whether it's your friend or if it's you and you've never seen the person, and describe that person and have someone sketch it out. At the end, compare the photograph to the composite sketch, and you're going to be like, oh, shit, right? And because a lot of times there's going to be a lot wrong with that sketch. Now do the same experiment with trauma. But the stress of being in... Exactly, channel. Yeah. Now try the same experiment with the trauma. Like, if you have something... Now, I don't want to, like, advise you to, like, scare your friends or whatever. But if, say, you have a friend who's, like, scared of needles or something like that. Like, whatever. And, of course, make sure your participants are fucking consensual people that want to do this experiment. Don't go around, right? But use, like, a sterile needle or something like that. And then, like, poke them with the needle while they're seeing the photograph go past. Like, introduce trauma to the experiment in a safe and consensual way, and you'll see that makes it even worse. It's just like Channel says, but the stress of being in a crime makes it even worse, doesn't it? Yes, 100%, Channel. So, with these types of conditions, a lot of times, especially with EAR, right? Look at this sketch. And this is a really good composite, by the way. This is mind-blowingly good composite. Compare this photo to Joseph D'Angelo. I've done it before. Or, let's see. Do I have another composite somewhere? Up here. I think there's like a shelf for this shit. Anyway. A lot of the EAR victims were under horrible, traumatic duress. Like, they were being beaten and attacked and... terrified for their lives. And in those conditions, they sometimes caught instantaneous glimpses of this guy's face, and then people drew that composite based on that memory, and they went, well, my suspect looks like the sketch. It's like, well, then it's probably not your suspect. That's another thing I want to point out. If your guy looks identical to the composite, it's probably not the right guy. Because one thing that we can generally at least make a starting assumption on in these composite sketches is that they aren't identical representations of the person. So if your suspect looks exactly like the Presidio Heights composite of the Zodiac, it's probably not the Zodiac. Because almost certainly the Zodiac doesn't look exactly like the Presidio Heights composite sketch. We have all of the scientific logic and reasoning that we can apply to the situation tells us, and sometimes that sounds counterintuitive. Like, oh, well, how can you say that if my suspect looks like the sketch, then it's definitely not my suspect? But the reality is that a lot of times, composites just don't look exactly like the person. And so I think that's a good, reference point to think that, well, if he looks like the sketch, if he looks too much like the sketch, don't be surprised if it's not him. Now, it could be. Sometimes we, look at the baseline killer. Go to Google and type in baseline killer composite sketch. Very, very good composite. Like, dead on. But that is rare. Like, dead on. Look at the Richard Ramirez Night Stalker composite and then compare it to the Night Stalker. And although there may be some similarities and some overlap in those sketches and some general resemblance, it's not identical. So try these experiments for yourselves. Have a friend get a fleeting glimpse of a person in a photograph, describe that person to his composite sketch artist, have the composite sketch artist draw it, and then compare it at the end. And you might find that these things aren't as accurate as you might believe if you're in this community. All right. That's point 2. Point 3. Early morning rapist. Yeah, early morning rapist is a trip too, and even early morning rapist is not a perfect likeness of Joe D'Angelo. But why would it need to be? I agree with you, Murder Inc. I think he was the EMR too. See, Murder Inc. and I do have some overlap, and I think that, he's not. Whatever. Okay, number 3. I almost want to amend this to say 5. But there are 4 degrees at minimum between an offender and his likeness in a composite. 4 degrees of separation. Minimum between an offender and his likeness in a composite. What does that mean? Well, witness memory. Okay, so let's say you have, what's a layer of separation? A layer of separation is something that removes you from an actual identical likeness. Let's say a layer of separation would be, I'm going to give you the 4. The 4 layers that are here, minimum. GGD strikes early morning after people fall asleep too. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, EMR and EAR are both striking at roughly the same times in the morning. 3, 4 a.m., stuff like that. And then EAR struck sometimes earlier, 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning. I think it was really dependent on what the sleeping schedules of his victims were like. And he, of course, learned those by prowling their houses and doing hang-up phone calls and watching them. That's why we call him the Night Stalker. The original Night Stalker, because he was a stalker. All right, so 4 degrees minimum of separation between an offender and his likeness in a composite. 1, witness memory. So try this for yourself. Try to envision the face of your friend. Get a good, clear picture of what you remember your friend looks like, and probably your memory is going to be very good. The image in your head is very good of what they look like. Now draw it. And what you'll find is that when you draw it, it doesn't really match the memory that's in your head. And you can get pretty close, but you'll be looking at your own drawing and going, yeah, it kind of looks like him, but it's not quite there, and I can't figure out why. I do this all the time because I draw human faces all the time, composite sketches, I do these experiments. I'll look at one of my drawings of a face, and some people are better at this than other people, but I'll look at a drawing of a face and be like, yeah, it looks like him, but it's not quite like him. And then show it to someone else, and they'll be like, no, it doesn't look anything like him. And what you're learning there is that people's conception of what they saw is just different. Then try to translate it into a drawing or a description. And you're going to start to see that there's a deviation that happens. So that's layer 1 of separation. 2 is a witness description. So when I envision or bring to memory a person, the image in my head is going to be probably more accurate than when I try to describe that person to someone. Let's say, like, I'm talking about my friend Kevin here. Well, he has kind of like high cheekbones. He has narrow eyes. He's like medium complexion, like Hispanic toned. He always has kind of like a grumpy, like, sort of and if anyone out there is good at drawing faces and you want to try it, but based on the description I'm giving you right now of Kevin, do a composite sketch of him and then show me it, and I'll tell you, and I'll give you a photo, and then we'll compare. That'll be fun. But he has kind of like a grumpy resting face, like this, like it's like kind of skeptical and grumpy looking. He has kind of a native looking appearance. I think he has some Native American blood in him. His hair goes like this, but when it's not gelled, it like hangs down. He has earlobes disconnected from his jawline, I think. And we can talk about that too, channel, and that's a good point, actually. Anyway, that's about as good as I can do to describe you, Kevin. His face is a little bit scrunchier than mine. Like, overall, it's not as tall as mine. It's not quite as narrow. It's kind of like here, and a lot of that is high cheekbone. He has prominent eyebrows. Now try to sketch what I just told you, and you're going to be like, you're going to be surprised when I show you a picture of him. And I've tried a composite sketch of him, and I know what he looks like, and it's hard. He's hard to draw. The witness description. Now you have the artist's ability. So in the case of the Zodiac Killer, Juan Gonzalez, I believe his name was, who sketched the famous Presidio Heights sketch, was not an art student. He wasn't a professional artist. He was just a police officer who had some experience drawing human faces, and he drew the famous picture of the Zodiac Killer. So that's a measure of artist ability. Now, some composite sketch artists are going to be better artists than other ones. And there's a variable aspect of that. So now you're up to 3 layers of separation. Witness memory, witness description, artist ability, and the last one so far, and then I think there's even a 5th thing, but artist style. I'll give you the 5th one right now off the top of my head, actually. But artist style. Some people draw faces a certain way, and other people draw faces another way. For example, I'm working on a book, and it's basically, have you heard, like, if you've seen the Blair Witch Project, it's like found footage. I'm doing a book where it's like found journal, and it's a crime story. And I did a couple composite sketches for the book that are meant to look like the offender who's telling you the story in the book, because it's a found journal of a killer. And by the way, it seems incredibly raw and realistic. It's a very disturbing book, but so far. But I did a couple composite sketches, and then I was like, well, I want my wife to do a sketch of him too, because I want there to be like different styles of art between the composites. I don't want them to all look like they were drawn by me, because that's not very realistic. It's better to have another artist come along. And the same example I'll give you when my old band Final Perception did its debut album, Surface Tension. My guitarist and co-composer and fellow songwriter Austin, he wanted to put his vocal on the album because he wanted you to be able to hear more than one voice in the album. And it's very smart, because we recognize things like this. Like, the style of the drawing can influence what it looks like. The 5th thing is the communication between the witness and the artist. So really, there's 5 degrees minimum, 5 layers of separation between what the offender looks like and what he looks like in the sketch. And so that's why I say, if your suspect looks exactly like the composite, it's probably not your suspect, because there are 5 layers of separation minimum that I can name you each one between what he looks like and what he looks like in the sketch. To go over them again: witness memory, witness description, artist ability, artist style, communication between witness and artist. And all of those things matter. Channel points out a sixth layer, but it's not a sure, like all the things that I mentioned are fundamental aspects of the composite process. You can't avoid them. The only time you can avoid them is if the composite sketch artist is the person who saw the offender, and that's pretty rare. But it does happen, actually. It happened in the Maggiore case. And this is a possible variable, but it's not always present. Channel says fair amount of sketches created off an encounter while the witness was under the influence. For example, if they're getting high or getting drunk, their memory and their perception of what a person looks like can be influenced by the drugs or the substances in their body. And this doesn't always apply because not all witnesses are loaded when they see somebody, but it's a good point, Channel. I like that point because I've been loaded for much of my life, and so it applies to me and it really resonates with me. It's a good one. So you have like 5 minimum fundamental layers of separation between those two appearances, and you also have other things that are more variable things, like were they loaded at the time, were they suffering from a disorder, are they whatever. What are some, and of course you have a witness. Other people are just better at facial recognition than other people. We can't really use that as a fundamental layer of separation the same way we can with the 5 that I mentioned, but they may very well apply. So, okay. Point 4. Composite sketches work best when we have numerous. This is powerful stuff right here. In the Zodiac case, we have basically 2 composite sketches. Technically, we have like 4. But we really only have 2. Because 2 of those 4 are first drafts. Like, we have the Lake Berryessa voyeur, and I do think that the voyeur was the Zodiac killer. There's even some debate about that, but I'm like convinced it's him, personally. And I think most serious Zodiac researchers wouldn't disagree with that. I think most serious Zodiac researchers would agree with me that the Lake Berryessa voyeur was, in fact, the Zodiac. But we only have 2 revised composites in the Zodiac case. So not many to go on. In the Son of Sam case, we have like 10 or something like that. I'm not sure the exact number. Manny will know the number. In the EAR case, we have tons of these fucking things. And some of them might be the EAR and some of them might not be him. We don't know which ones are. One thing that we can do to start to make assumptions about what an offender might look like is when we have recurring features across numerous sketches. So the more sketches we have, the more of a data pool we have to draw from. If every single time in the composite sketch the offender has, a wide mouth every time, or 80% of the time, then we can kind of start to assume that, I want to see that Murder Inc. Are you allowed to comment links in here? If you're not, I would like to see if there's a way for me to make sure that you can. Try to post a link to what you're talking about, because I do want to see all that stuff you're mentioning there. It would be very interesting to see. The thing is that the more composites we have of an offender, the more we can start to pick details that align across them. So in the case of the Zodiac, we have 2. What we can see across those sketches is that he has kind of rectangular, narrow eyes that look like this, kind of. But mine are a little more elliptical, almond shape, whatever. Oh, that's too bad. Okay. And is this... So this is your WordPress, and then go / and then put everything you typed? I will try that out. Try to type the link and then add, like, the number 9 throughout the link and see if that breaks it up, and then take the .com out. Okay. Yeah, I'll try that out. I'm going to copy that down right now, actually. Oh, geez. He sits at a computer and still writes by hand. Smoked out. Okay, 2020. Let's see. 2020. 12/20/Ketty -cabin. Okay. So what we can see in the Zodiac sketches across those 2 sketches is that he has these kind of rectangular long eyes like this. And we can also see that he has this kind of narrow nose that goes like this and then bulbs at the end. Can we say for sure? No, because we only have it occur 2 times. So it could be a coincidence. But if we had 20 sketches of the Zodiac and all of them showed that, then you'd start to make a fair and safe assumption that maybe the offender looks like that. Or has those features, rather. The true value of composites, I've said this before, it's kind of like a catchphrase for me. The true value of composites lies not in the specific likeness of any one composite, but the recurrence of similar features across numerous composites. That's where you start to get data. You know, if every composite shows him with shoulder-length dirty blonde hair, then he probably has shoulder-length dirty blonde hair, or in Iran's case, he's wearing a fucking wig, which is even more annoying. And that takes us into the next point. Point 5 is that offenders alter their appearance commonly. We see this a lot. You know, it's my personal opinion that the East Area Rapist was wearing wigs during the commission of his prowling. Some people disagree with that. Some people think that that's just because we were seeing people who weren't the East Area Rapist and it was making his way into composites. But the thing is, across, you know, dozens and dozens of prowling reports, we see a suspicious young white male with shoulder-length dirty blonde hair who always seems to be in the area. And there are some times, like Ripe in Court, for example. You know, I am a Ripe in Court was D'Angelo kind of guy. There's a few out there, Morph, who suggest against it. But definitely, to me, the circumstantial evidence, or the circumstances in the Ripe in Court event, the College Greens shooting, as some call it, was D'Angelo. But there's a problem, because both Ripen composites show a guy with shoulder-length dirty blonde hair. I think I have a replica of the Ripen composite. Let's see if I can find it. Do I have it? Yeah. It's not a very good one, though. Some of my replicas are better. Like, look at my Zodiac replica. It's traced. I didn't draw this, you know. There's my Zodiac replica. And then here is, oops, wrong shelf. Here's Ripen. This one's not as good. I know the lighting's not very good. Anyway, so with Ripen Court, both of those composites show an individual with medium or shoulder-length dirty blonde hair. Well, we know that D'Angelo never had that because he was a police officer and they're not allowed to have that. But for some reason, East Area Rapist kept getting sketched with that long hair. So what's going on? I think he's wearing wigs. And I'm sure Murder Inc., what do you think about the wig hypothesis? I'm sure Murder Inc. loves that one. So we have the situation where offenders are altering their appearance. They're wearing wigs. They're wearing glasses. They don't normally wear glasses. They're, putting on fake mustaches or growing facial hair and then removing it in preparation for crimes or in the aftermath of crimes. They're changing their hairstyles, which we see with Berkowitz. He's always changing his hairstyle across the composites to, to thwart those witness descriptions. So we also have that element. You know, by these people's logic, D'Angelo can't be the East Area Rapist because the East Area Rapist had long hair. Except, we know he's the East Area Rapist because we have DNA. Yeah, Murder Inc. likes wigs too. I do. I totally do. I think wigs are a very, very powerful... In fact, I think wigs are one of the holdback pieces of information in the East Area Rapist case and in the Zodiac case because they're a very, very, very effective form of disguise, and law enforcement doesn't want people to know that they can do that. I think that law enforcement doesn't want people to understand that they can slap a wig on their head and fuck up everyone's idea of what this guy looks like, because your hairstyle can have a huge impact on what's of someone's overall interpretation of your appearance. A lot. You know, what do we see in Zodiac? That every single time someone described or saw him, he had different hair. Every time. Not one time does the Zodiacs... You can argue maybe at Berryessa was the same hairstyle as Blue Rock Springs, but there's some conditions that you have to meet. You have to blame lighting. You have to do certain things, you know, that just don't work. And in this case, I think it's one of the holdback things. I think there's a reason we're not being told that Joe D'Angelo was wearing wigs. And I think a lot of that is because law enforcement is scared to release that information. Because it's extremely effective to wear a wig. Okay. Memory is fallible. Point 6. It's a pretty adjacent point to everything we've talked about so far, but your memory just isn't perfect. Whatever you think that somebody, like say you caught one glimpse of somebody, you might remember them as having like a cleft chin or something like that. They don't actually have that. Now that's a specific example, but in a lot of cases or situations, your memory is just not perfect. Someone might remember, oh, I thought that person looked like this, but they didn't. It's just your memory is fallible. So that's a pretty basic point. Number 7, we see what we expect or want to see. So if we go into something with a preconceived notion, like say Surfer, let's look at Surfer Dude. Some people, like I think this is an incredible composite of D'Angelo, by the way. Murder Inc., what do you think about this? This is one of those early East Area Rapist composites that we got. It's amazingly accurate. I have a picture of the comparison here for you. Let's pull it up. Let's see, Surfer Dude. Where's this Surfer? Okay, D'Angelo Surfer Dude, maybe. I don't know where the fuck it is. I had a picture of it where I have them side by side. It might be in like documents or some weird shit. No. Let's try videos. I remember it being somewhere weird. I don't know where it is though. It's kind of weird. How about gallery? Gallery usually will. The only one that looks like him is a Laverne. Oh, let me put them side by side and see how that is. That's interesting because Murder Inc. thinks that Surfer Dude is not a good composite of D'Angelo, and I disagree. But it's just because we're all like, here we go. Let's look at this feature for feature. Look at the eyes. I mean, what's wrong with those eyes? Even the shape of them's good. Look at the shape of those eyes. It's good. And look at his eyebrows, the way that they're thin and arc over the eyes. Now, the eye sockets aren't quite deep enough, but pretty much they are. Look at those eyes, man. Now look at the nose. Now, Surfer Dude has a little bit longer, more narrow nose. It's basically the one thing that's wrong with him. Look at his ears. They're perfect. You know, the nose is not bad, but it's a little bit longer on Surfer Dude. And now look at the mouth. And because of that longer nose, all they needed to do was move the tip of his nose up a little bit and stretch it just a little bit at the bottom. And in fact, you know, to kind of I know Murder Inc. is going to love this. Look at the nose of the Surfer Dude and look at the nose of the Zodiac. Where did I do with it? Well, I just had it seconds ago, didn't I? Oh, by golly. Okay, Zodiac. Look at Zodiac's nose. And look at Surfer Dude's nose. Coincidence? Maybe. Maybe not. I don't know. You know, I know Murder Inc. loves that because Murder Inc. believes that D'Angelo is Zodiac, and I'm not saying he's wrong. I think he's wrong, but I can't say that for sure, and I definitely think he's a better suspect than fucking Don Chaney. So I'm not really bagging on Murder Inc. for that. But the nose is pretty similar to Zodiac's nose. Now let's look at the mouth. And we see that Surfer Dude has a little bit more of a protruding lower lip. than D'Angelo does, but overall, not bad. And then, of course, we have the roundness of the face and cheeks. It's a very good composite, guys. It's pretty rare that we get something this good. Except, what do we notice in Surfer Dude? He's got shaggy, long blonde hair. So, is he wearing a wig? Probably. Moving on. Okay. What I meant was, we see what we expect to see. Like, if we don't believe that Berryessa reads exactly like the EAR script, even use clothesline, very specific, yeah, I agree. You know, I need DNA before I'm going to jump to the same conclusion you have, but I am open to it. I'm not saying it's impossible. I wouldn't even be surprised. If we eventually get the Zodiac's DNA and it's a match to Janelle Cruz, I wouldn't be surprised. I would be like, whoa, what the fuck? Like a little bit, I would be surprised, but I wouldn't deny the DNA. You know, it wouldn't shock me to the point where I would have like an existential crisis about it. I'm open to the possibility that Zodiac is Euron's. I don't think so, but it's possible. He's certainly better than Don Chaney. Way the fuck better than Don Chaney is the suspect. The reason the G-Men will never announce match is JJD. I know, isn't that annoying? Oh my god, that's so annoying. Does that ever expire, Murdering? Doesn't that expire when he dies? I think when he dies, it's possible, you know? Murdering could be right. And, I want to point to the petition at the bottom of my screen right now, change.org/p/release all Zodiac-related SFPD files. You can go to that link, sign that petition. It will take you 10 seconds. Sign it. Not even 10 seconds, really. It's literally just hit sign, and it's done. Type your name, hit sign, boom. Okay, if I want Shell Cavalli to be Zodiac, then every time I look at the Presidio Heights sketch, my brain is going to try to resolve that as being Shell Cavalli. And I'll be like, that's him. It looks like Shell Cavalli. So, people, and this is less of a strong point than the other points, but I think it still applies, that people see what they want to see. You know, if you go into this investigation and you're looking through the lens of, oh, he's Euron's, then you're going to see things like the Berryessa script, and you're going to go, well, look at that. Look how close that is. It could very well be him. But it kind of gives you this like a framework or like a context under which the brain is operating. So whenever time, if some people think that those Son of Sam sketches, like Savino, some people, like the person I was talking about earlier, don't want to accept that, or don't want to believe that Berkowitz shot Wendy Savino, and so when they look at the sketch, they say it looks nothing like him, because that's what their brain wants to tell them. When I look at the sketch, when Manny looks at the sketch, we say, that looks a lot like David Berkowitz. Are we also victims of the same phenomenon? Yes. The same phenomenon applies to us, but we're working with more, we have a lot of circumstantial evidence to indicate that he clearly shot Wendy Savino. I mean, you have to be in denial to not conclude that, I think. But the idea is that we go in with a certain type of lens on, a certain type of context, and when we look at the sketch, we see what our brain already believes. Okay. Composites exaggerate features. One of the things that composite sketch artists do when they draw offenders is, say the offender has a protruding lower lip, they exaggerate that feature on purpose, so that other people, like witnesses that come forward later on, see the sketch and they go, oh, protruding lower lip, oh, shit, and it draws their attention to that aspect. So we know that composite sketches are already exaggerating features that aren't really as prominent as they are in the sketch in real life. And that changes what a composite looks like. Ultimately, that has an effect on the composite sketch's appearance. Pop cultural styles may play a role. If everybody in the 1970s had long blonde hair, including my dad, had like shoulder length, not everybody, but it was popular at the time. Men in the 1970s very commonly had long blonde hair. very surfer-looking hairstyle, especially regionally, like wherever you're from. You know, for example, right now everybody in Portland has colored hair. In Portland, Oregon, has like blue, pink, red, whatever. Not everybody. How dare you? That's racist against people from Portland. Where the fuck did the vape go? No. And so sometimes a witness's memory of a person they saw is going to get influenced by that pop cultural style. They're going to remember somebody as having, you know, long blonde hair who might have only really had medium length blonde hair because that was popular at the time and that's what their brain expected to see when they saw the offender. That too can influence a composite. You know, if afros were popular in the 1980s or whatever year, I don't remember exactly, but if it's popular to have a perm hair in that time period, and the person you saw just kind of had like a little bit puffy hair, but not like an afro, you might see that person and think, well, he's got an afro because every fucking person that you see every day has that. So the pop cultural style can influence what a person remembers someone to look like. You know, if I see someone from Oklahoma, I might remember them as having a face tattoo that they don't actually have because they're from Oklahoma and everyone from fucking Oklahoma has a face tattoo. How dare you? That's racist. Okay. Medium influences style. If I draw something with pencil, it will basically fundamentally look different than something I draw with charcoal. They're two different types of drawing. So, for example, I'll show you little sneak previews for my upcoming book, which I don't know when it's going to come out. This is the gas mask composite of the offender from my book. And this is the other composite of the offender from my book. This one is drawn with charcoal. This one's done with pencil. I did it on purpose so that they would look different. So this has a more cartoony, bold look to it. This has a more subdued appearance. Actually, this is not the correct composite. I have the composite here. I'm going to put them on the screen. It'll just look better on the screen. Okay? So I do want to give you guys little sneak previews of my book. Why not? Because composites are going to play a huge role in my book because I'm in love with composite sketches and they're badass. Okay, let's see. Benzene in this one, and then also, where is he? This one. I'm going to put all three of these on here, I think. Yeah, I think it helps to demonstrate my point. So this is the gas mask composite for my book. It's done with charcoal. This is the pencil composite for my book. And I actually used a pretty thick pencil here on purpose. We'll put the other one on screen too. I'm going to put like 4 of them up right now just for you guys to look at. This one's also charcoal. Oops. This. And then this one's the one that my wife drew, which is also in the book. And what you can see is that the style of drawing is different between, for example, this one up on the top right and this one down here on the bottom left. They're just a different style of composite. All 4 of these people represent the same person in the book, but they look pretty different. That's the nature of composite sketches. What can we tell about this person? He's about 20 to 30-year-old white male adult. He probably has short hair, and he has... he's a very nondescript looking guy, actually. His earlobes are basically connected to his jawline in all of them. But the medium can influence the appearance of a composite. You know, the charcoal one looks different than the graphite ones, simply because of the material they're drawn with. Okay. Unrelated individuals can be mistaken for an offender. Here's a prime example of that. I'll give you this is the one that I know to draw your gaze to here. That. And of course it's the one I can't find. That's classic. Where the fuck is it? Oh, here we go. It's right in front of my face. So this guy is a composite sketch from the Son of Sam case. It's not Berkowitz. It's a guy who was driving away. And they just thought it was the Son of Sam. But it's not the Son of Sam. It was just a guy who was there. You know. And that can happen too. There's going to be more points that I didn't cover here or forgot about. But the reality is that this is 11 things right here. Delphi murder, the young guy. Ooh, that's interesting. Pull that. We'll talk about that next. I also want to. I wrote down his Keddy Cabin link that he sent because I am interested in that. And I'm murdering. Does that include the catch and release comment on there and everything too? So this is just something I hastily cobbled together last night before I went to sleep. This is like 11 points that clarify the issue of composite sketches in true crime. These are all very valid points. Some of them more than others. You know, some of them are a little bit weak. Some of them are a little reaching in certain areas. But the reality is that there's so many variables at play when an offender is drawn in a composite sketch that you cannot, it is anti-scientific to look at a sketch like the Zodiac sketch and go, my suspect, or he doesn't look like the sketch, therefore he's not the guy. People who tell you that don't have any clue what they're talking about. Don't even listen to those people. They're just wrong. Bless you, I love you. They don't know what they're talking about. Never rule someone out. And Paul Holes said this too in the HLN Unmasking a Killer special, I think. Never rule someone out because he doesn't look like the sketch. That's dumb. And you see this all the time with Arthur Lee Allen on Reddit. You know, Murder Inc. thinks it was D'Angelo. I think it was Lee Allen. I'm open to the possibility that it's D'Angelo. It's very, very possible. You know, it's not, I would never, that's why I would never give one of these things a quantified numerical value. Like people say, like, I'm 70% on that suspect. Like, what the fuck does that even mean? That's just ridiculous. It's not, it's like they treat it like it's a game. Like, oh, have you played Suspect Roulette? Oh, no, it died. Perfect timing, I guess. But, like, don't rule someone out because he doesn't look like a specific sketch. That's so stupid and unbelievably dumb. It hurts so much in my brain when people do that. They're like, well, it couldn't be Lee Allen because he doesn't look like the sketch. You know. And D'Angelo doesn't look like the sketch either. He might be him. Both of those guys might very well be Zodiac. You know. And Murder Inc., you're big into police thrill kill teams, aren't you? Where you're like talking about how multiple officers conspire to do these random shootings and they switch places and do different crimes between each other. That's possible too. You know, you might have 3 offenders in Zodiac. I don't think you do. I think you have a single specific offender because there are some circumstances that indicate that, but I can be wrong. There might have been 3 Zodiac killers. I don't know. Maybe that's why his hairstyle is never the same. Is that less likely than the guy slaps a wig on his head? Yeah. Drew Beeson would tell you no. Drew Beeson thinks that because the Berryessa offender had long hair, that it's more likely that there were 2 Zodiac killers than it is that he was wearing a wig. And what's going on there really is Beeson he put too much work into Don Chaney and now he can't go away from that opinion. And that's a dangerous position to be in as a true crime researcher because now you're not a researcher anymore, you're just an advocate for a suspect. You know. And I don't want that. Look at how much work he's put into Ted Braden. Look how much work he's put into Don Chaney. He could never allow it to not be those guys unless the DNA... JJD did not always work alone according to confidential informant. Yeah, so like, that's a very real possibility. That would surprise me. If there was more than one East Area rapist, but sometimes, you know, truth is stranger than fiction, man. And I don't know. I wasn't there. There might have been more than one East Area rapist. And that might account for why EAR had dark leg hair sometimes and other times had light leg hair or no leg hair. We know about, I know Murder Inc. knows about that because he's dug the case deeper than I have. But you remember that, Murder Inc., how the first descriptions of EAR had a darker hair, darker complexion guy, and then later on he kind of evolved into this light-skinned surfer-looking dude with blonde hair, and and those descriptions changed. Why? I don't know. It could be that the witnesses are wrong. It could be that there's more than one EAR. We just don't know. And we don't know because none of those Sacramento crimes have DNA. None of them. Not one. Sacramento threw all their DNA out. Even in the Maggiore crime, I think, which is like insane. Or I think that they didn't throw out the evidence in Maggiore, but they threw out the EAR evidence when they knew that EAR was the Maggiore shooter. Compare bro to Elvis comp. Yeah. So. Oh, compare his brother. Oh, shit. Okay, let's do that. Do you have a picture of his brother? What's his brother's name? Damn, I forgot. What's his brother's name? Murder Inc. remember. Elvis Composite, East Area Rapist. The EAR case is a fascinating textbook of information that we get that we can apply to other true crime cases. It's one of the most powerful, because he was so prolific, because he operated for so long, and because the investigation to find his identity spanned so many different facets of law enforcement and criminal investigations. I mean, there's aspects of crime scene investigation today that we have as a direct result of the East Area Rapist. And of course, the biggest one there is the investigative genetic genealogy. He was the first criminal offender, I think. No, that's not first person identified, but like the first big league, high profile criminal offender that was identified with that methodology. And now we use that all the time. The fingerless man. Oh shit, okay. Jeez, murdering. You got links on deck right here. Let's see. Write that one down too, because I do want to look at these. 2019/04. You know, Murder Inc., I like having you on this channel a lot because I used to kind of write you off a lot more, but you're a very knowledgeable researcher in this case. You know a lot about the EAR case, and I'm so scientific enough to admit that there's a very real possibility that everything I think I believe in a case is just dead fucking wrong. And I'm totally open to a lot of your ideas, even that he's the Zodiac killer. I don't think he was, but I'm not going to write that off. And so it is good having you here to give links like this, because this is really interesting stuff to talk about, you know. Only advice or suggestion I would like to give you for your work is to mask or otherwise kind of tone down the apparent bias, because a lot of your like terminology, like the G-men and like even being called murder, I'm not saying you're wrong at all. It's just that it looks biased when there's like a law enforcement resentment angle that's present, and you can see. And I'm not saying at all that you're wrong. There's tons of cops that act like that, for sure, of course, because they have a badge and a gun and they're allowed to. But if you can come across as a lot more unbiased, objective towards your opinions of police in general, people are going to be more receptive to the information that you're putting out, because I think you have a lot of great information, a lot of great news articles. It's just when there's also like a bit of a rhetorical angle of like, oh, all cops are like evil dirtbags. Not saying you're wrong that cops are evil dirtbags, or that some of them are evil dirtbags, or whatever you want to say. That can be off-putting to some people. And maybe you just don't care. I agree, because I don't like badge bunnies either, Murder Inc. You know, and those people are doing the same thing in the opposite direction. You know, I can't stand when people are like so loving of law enforcement that they won't accept the possibility that the offender could be a cop. It's like with the AR. Look how many people online said, no, he's not a police officer. No, you're wrong. You just hate cops. And then he turned out to be a cop. So it's good to be in the middle there, you know. But other than that, I love the information you're giving. I'm going to be looking at all this shit. So, you know what I think's weird? How come nobody ever noticed that EAR was missing a finger? I know it's really specific, and I guess maybe because of his gloves. But it's interesting that no one caught on to that. Never came up in the case file that they thought the offender was missing a finger. Unless that's exactly what you're pointing to me now, and I just haven't seen it. So, okay, everybody. That is 11 points to clarify the purpose and the nature of composite sketches. Live from a spinning ball, this has been the most banned prowler on the entire fucking